Hello, Challenger. Today I have here the Java champion, Vincent Mayers. He is a tech community leader at Atlanta Jug. He is also an organizer from DevNexus, JCON Dev, Vue Conference, US, and Connect.js. So he's organizer from many top conferences. He's also a senior manager developer for community programs. He, for example, was the main organizer from the Java Champions group. And currently, he's been consulting for tech conferences to ensure their success. And he worked for big companies such as Oracle and JFrog. So, Vincent, you're very welcome to the Java Challengers channel. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good, my friend. Nice to be here with you, Rafam. Very good to see you again.
Good to see you too. It's my pleasure to have you here and to be talking with you. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation.
Yeah, of course.
And Vincent, as I ask the Java people here in the channel, so I would like to know more about your career trajectory. What were the biggest lessons you learned and how you overcame them? It could be a life lesson or a career lesson, anything that is useful for Java developers so that they can improve and
Sure.
grow.
Sure. Well, so I'm in Atlanta, US now. I've been here for 23 years, but I'm from London originally. I grew up in London, and I moved to the US in 2002. My kind of like career trajectory was I was a technical recruiter for almost 20 years. And I was working in London for an American company, Tech Systems. People in the US are familiar with Tech Systems, or Aerotech as it was back then. And I worked a lot of American leadership and became friends with a lot of the folks there. And so I did that from 95 to 2001. And then in 2002, some American colleagues that I had then moved back to the US with Tech Systems. One guy was in Dallas, another guy was in Tampa, Florida, and they wanted to start a business of their own. So, they called me and said, "Hey, do you want to come help us start this business?" And so I moved out here in 2002 with 2 bags, about $1,000 in cash. And we moved to Atlanta. So we picked Atlanta because it's the biggest hub in the Southeast. And there's a lot of enterprise tech companies here. And of course, we'd rather have started this business in Miami because, it's Miami. But there wasn't really any business there for us, especially in 2002. We'd just gone through the dot-com bust and business was, the economy was down. Anyway, we picked Atlanta because it's a huge hub, massive airport. The airport in Atlanta is the busiest airport in the world by volume of flights. It's not the biggest airport. I've been to plenty bigger, but by number of flights in and out, it's the busiest airport in the world. And it's a great logistics hub. Anyway, we started a staffing company here, and we were placing contractors with clients. And around 2004, J2EE was blowing up. Everyone was using this J2EE stack, Java 2 Enterprise Edition. And I started to sponsor the Atlanta Java Users Group. At the time you could sponsor it, you could bring a banner to put on the wall, you could bring jobs to hand out. And I wanted to learn more about the platform and language. And I wanted to meet people. I wanted to be part of the community. I wanted to meet prospective consultants, prospective, customers, but more about learning the technology. I'd realized long ago in London, the importance of, as a recruiter, of understanding a tech stack. So I've got a degree in pottery. I went to art school for 4 years. I'm not an engineer by training. But I understood the importance of understanding what I was talking about as a recruiter when I went to interview my customers. When you're a recruiter and you interview your customers, you become a business analyst. You take requirements. It's exactly the same process. You ask questions, okay? And you do that and you do it well, then you get the right answers. There's no point in them giving you just a job description because, as any of you know that have been applied for jobs recently, job descriptions are pretty terrible for the most part. It's a whole bunch of word salad on there and they don't really say anything meaningful. So I remember once I was in London at a bank, and back then in 95, 96, the kind of enterprise tech stack in banking was C+ on Sybase with Power Builder front ends, right? This was like Java had just come out, but it wasn't widely used then. And I was at my meeting and I was doing my sales pitch. I was like, we can provide you with all these engineers. They know C++, they know Sybase, they know Corber. And the manager said, stop, what's Corber? He's like, you wanted to know if I knew. I said, well, I knew. I said, it's Common Object Request Broker Architecture. And the tool that everyone uses right now is Orbix by Iona out of Dublin. And he was blown away that I knew this, but I only knew this because I understood it was important to understand what these things were. And he said, well, if you know that, you can certainly help me find people that know similar stuff. So anyway, fast forward, I wanted to learn more about the Java stack, because it was really most of the requests that we were getting back in 2004. So I started to sponsor the Jug, and I stayed involved over the years. And I went to the meetings, and it was tough for me back then going to these meetings because I'm a non-technical guy. And around 2004, 2005, there's no PowerPoint presentations like you see now. It's live coding and debugging on an IDE or on command line for like 2 hours, literally 2 hours. And I would like take a Red Bull or drink coffee so I wouldn't be the recruiter falling asleep at the back of the room, But over time, I started to absorb more and more of these things. And the more interviews that I did of candidates, the more questions I asked and understood the answers to. So it made me a really good recruiter. Anyway, around about, I think 2008, 9, something like that, the gentleman that was leading the Java user group moved to another city, and he asked me if I would join the board because he needed new board members. And then we actually formed that. We didn't have a board until that point. We just had one guy. So we formed the board. I joined as the treasurer. I'm the business guy. I'm the operations guy. So I joined to do that, and I've just stayed involved over the years. And yeah, so that's really been my career path. But being involved in the Jug has opened so many doors for me. So the Atlanta Java User Group runs a conference, DevNexus, every year. It's been called various things in its first few years. It was DevNexus the first year I went to it, I think around 2008, 9. That was the name of it. But we've run an event since 2004. And then it's like, well, you run the conference. I'm like, well, I know how to run a conference. Said, well, and then I thought about it. I was like, well, we know the venue because we've been there before. So we need a contract with the venue. We need we need speakers. The engineers on the board can arrange that. We need audio visual. We need sponsors. We need contracts. We need insurance. We need t-shirts. We need lunch, and on, right? So I kind of got thrown into this. And then I started to, after that, go to other conferences around the world. DevOps in Belgium, which is the big one in Belgium. JFocus in Sweden, for example. Java Zone in Norway. I just went to other conferences. Java 1, when it was Java 1, before it stopped being Java 1, just to see how it was done by other people and to learn what made things work and what didn't work and apply those things to our conference. And so I started to meet more and more people. And because I was a Jug leader and a conference organizer, I tended to network and socialize more with the other Jug leaders and conference organizers and the speakers. And they're typically speakers at these events. So they became my network and my friends who I have, to this day, a lot of them like yourself. And then I think around 2000, when was it? 2013, maybe 12, I got invited to be a Java champion because I'm a non-technical guy that's heavily invested in the community. And that, the Java Champion program is the kind of global MVP program for Java developers. But the criteria is not such that you need to have written books or created a framework or an API or a tool or contributed to an open source element of a language. It's more about community contribution over time. That could be the technical side. It could be other stuff. So it was surmised that I'd contributed to the community effort to help drive both the language and platform forward. So that's why I got invited to join that group. And then while all that was going on, we had sold our staffing company in, 2012 or something. And I was looking for a job. And it was interesting because one of the customers we had back then was an edtech startup that was massively funded by the Gates Foundation. And they were building an end-to-end data service for K through 12 for public education, basically essentially providing a single sign-on portal where educators could go and log in once and access all the things they need to access to create learning programs for students, or the state, federal, whatever, because it was a mess back then. So I was actually recruiting for them because the CTO knew me because he knew me from DevNexus. and the Java user group. So he reached out and said, hey, can you help me find engineers for this startup? And it was mostly Java. So I had a network. So I started working on this. But one of the roles that they wanted to hire for was for a community manager, an open source community manager. And this is an open source project. It was hosted on GitHub. And I tried to find somebody for them. I couldn't. In Atlanta, of course, back then, there was no one doing this in Atlanta. It wasn't a remote option for this. And then I was thinking about it, and they didn't have a job description. So I wrote it for them. I did some research. I looked at other job descriptions. And I put one together. I shared it with the CTO. He said, yeah, that looks great. That looks like exactly what we need. And then I was like, well, I'd love to do this. This would be a great job for me. So I said, okay, well, sure. But come with me. So I went and met the COO and the CIO, and then they hired me to be their community manager. And then I spent like 9 months with them, whatever, until they ran out of money. But it was a great experience. I ended up running the stand-ups because no one else wanted to do it when the CTO wasn't there. So I did that. Ended up managing the forums, the GitHub repos, and all our docs, our community site, and all the content on there. So it was a huge learning curve. And then after a while, that company ran out of money. I went back into sales for a couple of years, and then an opportunity came up with Oracle to work in developer programs at Oracle. So I joined Oracle and then worked on developer programs there, one of which was administering and running the Java Champions program. And then I did something similar at JFrog and then at Gradle, and then here we are kind of thing. So again, that's my kind of career path from someone with a degree in art to someone running kind of global community programs for tech companies and global events.
That's very interesting. I like, having you in the community who has different backgrounds, because you bring different things for us, right? It's not only technical. You have a different vision than us who are more technical, right? So this is very beneficial in my perspective. And one thing that I got interested in asking you is about what you learned by talking with tech leaders, with JUG leaders, about what makes a conference better and what makes a conference not that good. What are your main learning points to make a conference amazing?
Well, it's interesting you say that of a different view. You're right, it's perspective. Okay, I'm a huge fan of saying, look, I don't know anything at all. I've just got a perspective, which is different to an opinion, I think. And that's my opinion, that an opinion is different to a perspective. Or is it the other way around? Anyway, so a lot of times tech conferences, especially those put on by OEMs, by the organizations, by the product companies, they tend to focus on making them fancy marketing events. No, I don't mean in terms of the talks being more product marketing and feature marketing. I just mean the whole event. They're very swanky. They spend millions and millions of dollars on AV and other experiences and how it looks and everything. And that's great, because it does reflect their brand. Okay. But at the end of the day, my perspective is that attendees come for the content. A lot of them are, their organizations send them to these things, so they don't pay for their own tickets and travel and whatever, if there's that, if they're not in the geo. But they come so they can learn something that they can apply in their day job to make them better at their day job. And a lot of times at events, I think that organizers ignore the fundamentals. I mean, they don't ignore them completely, but there's not enough about the fundamentals of the job and the practical application of those fundamentals and the different use cases as examples for those fundamentals. Testing, design patterns, what have you. Now, of course, everybody wants to talk about AI. Sucks all the oxygen out of the room. It's very interesting and there's a lot going on. It doesn't really help someone sitting in a 200-person geographically distributed developer team that's maintaining a Java 12 code base. Okay? It doesn't. So that person may be at the conference and they come back with all this info about AI or whatever, but nothing's really going to help them, and it hasn't really helped them get better at their day job. Now, it isn't all that way. I mean, organizers do pay attention to fundamentals, but not enough, I don't think. And that's what attendees really want. You'd be surprised how many events I've been to where they don't provide coffee or water for people. I went to a huge event in Europe once. I think it's changed now, but the first 2 times I was there, and it was in somewhere in Germany. So they didn't have coffee or water or food for attendees. You had to buy your food when you're there. You can't expect people to come to a conference and then buy their own food. You know, it should be part of the ticket. Some conferences sell t-shirts. What? Really? No, you need to plan these things. And they're a huge expense, I know, as a conference organizer. You need to plan these things so they're part of the program, that you feed and water people during the day. You give them relevant content, not just the new shiny stuff, but relevant content that helps them in their day jobs get better at it. Because them getting better at their day jobs is how they get promoted. Okay, and make more money, which is ultimately why everyone goes to work anyway. Otherwise, we'd all sit at home and do nothing. Of course, they can be passionate about it. They still need to get paid well and have the opportunity to move up. Okay, so I think that's the main thing. It's a lot of times conferences fall into this trap of the swanky and the glitz and the glamour, and don't focus on the fundamentals that the audience needs.
That's a very good point, because many conferences I go, like, I see most of the talks, focused on the shiny toys, right? And then you go there, you learn lots of technology you never use in your career. And the important thing is, like, the things that you use on our day-to-day work, there is no talk about that. Then it's even difficult to negotiate with your company, say, hey, I'm going to this conference and I'm going to bring value back. But then if you bring only technologies that are completely crazy, that it's impossible to use to have a use case in your business application, then really you are going there only to see the shining toys that you probably forget in a couple of days. So this is extremely important, and most conferences, like you said, they will accept the talks about AI. AI is great. It's taking over the world bit by bit, right? Actually, by storm. It's taking the world by storm. But it doesn't mean that it's the answer for everything, right? It's not a silver bullet. So,
and, I believe that, again, my perspective is that in most companies, especially enterprise companies, people are paying attention to AI enabling stuff, because the tools are great productivity tools. They're not going to do these jobs for people. They can help them do more faster. But those are small subsets of these companies and their tech stacks and their tech effort and their tech debt. Right. I think these days, slightly digressing, the core functionality, the roadmap for products, generally speaking, less attention is being paid to. Look, no one has unlimited development time and unlimited developers, right? And budget. But I think some of the AI enablement is taking away from moving the roadmap forward and eliminating some of the tech debt and addressing some of the core functionality in the roadmap.
yeah. So, yeah, it's a really important point. And the other thing you told me that was very interesting was that you got an opportunity by networking in events, right? And this is something really hard for developers. I know that most developers are introvert, including me. So it's difficult to reach out to someone and start talking, right? It's uncomfortable, right? So what would be your advice for developers to engage more, to talk more with other developers or speakers? How would you recommend them to approach people? What should they ask?
Well, I mean, there's really no easy answer, because I do a talk on imposter syndrome and this comes up because people are like, well, what is the one thing I can do? I'm like, well, if there was the one thing you could do, then it'd be easy. It's a mindset shift. Okay. One of the good things about actually going to a tech conference, and look, this isn't the only way to network, okay, clearly, But one of the good things about going to a tech conference is ostensibly you should have pretty much unlimited, singular focus because you're there. Right. Look, we all check work email at conferences. We all jump on calls when we need it. It's just life. But the fact that you're at the venue, sometimes away from where you live, in another city, should give you a more singular focus and the ability to be in the moment more and totally kind of be present there with that community. The good thing about conferences is this concept of the hallway track. Okay. So at a conference, for those who are not familiar, the hallway track are the conversations you have between the sessions. At a conference, there are usually, more than one track, and there are single track conferences, but there's a track for DevOps, there's a track for security, there's one for languages, there's one for tools, there's one for AI, whatever. These are all tracks, and in that room, there'll be all those talks for that day or 2 days. The hallway track, again, is the conversations that you can have between the sessions. Waiting in line to get into a talk. I've seen this happen. Over lunch, randomly talk, turning to the person next to you. Over a coffee, at the reception in the evening, if there is one. It's you take the opportunity just to turn to the person next to you, or someone you make eye contact with and say, hi, where are you from, whatever. And the conversation will start to flow. Okay. Now, you're right. Engineers are usually pretty insular. I am by nature. I'm a Cancer. Cancerians, I'm not very outgoing by nature. I am totally happy being by myself, reading a book. But I can walk into a social situation and be social. But that's not who I am naturally. But how do you do it? It's like, how do you jump off the diving board or into the pool, the cold pool? You just got to take that leap. Okay. And then once you're in the water, it's not that bad. That might sound pretty simplistic, but it is the truth. Okay. We're all human beings. None of us, we're all interested in the same thing because we're there at this conference. And there's an advantage. Okay. It's not like you walk up to someone random in a group of people hi, and just talk to them. You're talking to someone with, generally speaking, the same interests as you, who's in that place for the same reason. That's the power of community, whether it's a chess club or a book club or whatever it is, doesn't matter, kayak club. You go there to do the thing you're passionate about, and there's other people there doing things they're passionate about. So you have something in common, all right? So from that perspective, it is pretty easy to start talking to someone, and inevitably your real world use case comes up in conversation, or you might have been to a Spring Boot talk, and that was a great talk. Oh yeah, I went to that talk, and I like this, and I like that, and have you thought about it this way? And then the conversation starts. But what you're working on in your day job may come up in conversation because we all like to talk. We can be persuaded to talk if someone engages us. And the person you're talking to may or may not have solved that problem, but they could have a perspective on it that changes the way you think about it. And you have an aha moment. And that's more valuable than any talk you went to that day. The fact that someone that you talk to randomly while you're sitting at lunch or something has something different to what you thought to say about your problem.
Yes. And we have a specific strategy to talk to someone in a line, because it's something that sometimes makes me a little bit uncomfortable to talk with someone while I'm waiting in the queue. But I know this is a very valuable skill because, instead of waiting, doing nothing, you could be talking to someone.
The way I do it, because again, I don't naturally like to, it's uncomfortable for me to just, and I do this for a living, right? To just turn to someone random and start a conversation. But my strategy would be to, if I'm standing in the line, and I've seen people do this, and I've done it myself, is that, you look at, instead of looking at your phone, like most people do, just look up and look around. And the person this side or that side, because you don't want to talk to somebody, 6 feet that way, that's not really, the person either side of you, they may look up, and if you make eye contact, a smile, okay, and you could say something like, I'm really looking forward to this talk. And what are they going to do then? They're not going to completely ignore you. Well, they might. Chances are they're not. Chances are you'll get into a conversation. And there you go. You just met someone new.
Yeah. sometimes we overcomplicate things, but it's still difficult to talk with someone who is looking at their phones because, like I said, it's what most people do, right? People are
Yeah.
looking at their phones, they are looking down. They want to avoid the contact with other people because it's too uncomfortable. So in those situations, it's kind of difficult.
It
If
is,
the
but
person doesn't even make an eye contact, like you
it's not going
wouldn't
to
like
work.
touch the person.
No, I wouldn't do that. It's not going to work every time. It needs to be organic, and I wouldn't disturb
Yeah.
someone just because they're looking at the phone. But again, if you make eye contact, there's an opening, and a strategy for doing that is to actually to be intentional about it, to plan to do this. Okay, to not when you go into that line, just in this use case, right? To plan to talk to someone if they make eye, that you're standing next to, if they make eye contact with you. Okay, and then the conversation starts. Okay, I'm looking forward to this talk. I've heard this guy's a great speaker. Whether you have or am doesn't even matter, right? You may know something about the speaker. You may have seen them before. It doesn't matter. You may have seen a similar talk before. It doesn't matter. There's something there that you're going to have in common with the person next to you that you make eye contact with, aside from the fact that you're both standing in line waiting to go in the talk.
And what do you recommend to developers to talk about themselves, to stand out, and possibly, get a job opportunity, or I don't know, maybe do a partnership, like any kind that would benefit both, right? Do you have like any suggestion? Because like the worst thing is that developers start talking about, the first thing that they shouldn't be talking about themselves. They should be talking about the other person. That's the first thing, right? But at the same time, not to talk bad things about themselves. Because, for example, let's suppose I'm a developer, I want a job. I have to put myself in a good position, right? I have to put myself, okay, I'm studying, I have experience, I know those concepts. Like I've been making an effort to get there, right? And like one basic mistake I see developers doing is that they say, "Oh, I'm a Java developer." Like they don't say anything that would make them stand out, right? So I would like to know what are your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Like, how can a developer position that himself or herself to like possibly have a partnership, possibly have something interesting happening for
So
both?
I think that, if we take the kind of random inline conversation use case, it's not going to happen every time where you need to come across as someone that's more than just a Java developer. You don't even have to come across as a Java developer. You're a person. Okay. You're just connecting with people. Now, anything
Yes.
else that happens in the conversation flows from that organically, because you may get to the point of, what do you do when you work? What do I do when you work? It may get to that point. It may not get to that point. You may just talk about the talk or the line or the weather. I don't know. But if you have enough of those conversations, you will get to the point where you live, where you work, what you do, what you're working for, comes up in the conversation organically. It's not going to happen every time. Okay. This is why if you are someone that's looking for a job, for example, and you're at a conference, it's a valuable opportunity for you to go and talk to as many people as possible. You may not find someone that can point you in the direction of a new job, but you may learn something which helps you in your next interview that you picked up randomly. Okay. And there's also so much pressure if you go into, this is my specific example of going into this conversation. I've got to get across the fact that I stand out other than being a Java developer. Way too much pressure. Okay. I do this for a living. I'm good at it. And I wouldn't want to do that.
That's true. It's more pressure to, to talk with someone, and you have to prove that you are a standout developer.
The goal is to make connections. And sometimes you make connections and enjoy and just make a connection, and that'll be the end of it. Other times those connections persist over time. You never know. You might connect on LinkedIn or some Slack group or whatever, or Discord or some interesting channel that you're all in. And over time, the relationship evolves. It has for me in those situations. And I met, lifelong friends at these things by having random conversations. And they're just, they've never really helped me in a career or understand that they're just friends. And I see them every now and then, once a year, maybe at an event, maybe once every 2 years sometimes. I don't know. But, we become friends. So that, and frankly, if all you come away from that conversation with is a new friend, well, that's a win if you ask me.
That's a big win. That's a big win.
Yeah.
Definitely. Because obviously, like, our life is not only work, it goes beyond that. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just talking to, when I was at Java 1 this year, talking to Billy Carando. He's on the Java developer advocacy team at Oracle. And we were having a conversation on a live stream. And he was saying that he was talking about his involvement in the Kansas City Java user group. He joined he had just moved to Kansas City or something. And, he joined the Java user group to learn. And he ended up, I guess, like myself, being one of the organizers many years later. But he has a monthly meetup with some of the people from the Kansas City. They go for a drink once a month. So the last like 7 or 8 years, this group of people that he met through the jug, they're all technologists, of course. They meet once a month for a beer, just a bunch of people hanging out for like an hour because they enjoy each other's company.
That's a good example. That's very nice. Because, if we talk only with people who are similar than us, we tend to be narrow-minded. And we are unable to expand, right? Unable to see other perspectives. And we are just in this small world of technology. And that doesn't help us grow.
Yeah, and it's the same like when you go to that conference and you're in that line for the room and you get in, the room's packed because it could be a very popular speaker, a very popular topic or what have you, and they're standing room only. You know what? Leave, go somewhere else. Go to one of the other things they have. Go to a Python or a DevOps talk. You know what? You might not do any Python or DevOps or web development talk. It doesn't matter. There might be something there that you find super interesting. Okay. And yes, maybe there's no practical application for you in your day job for learning web development or something, or you're not doing any Python, but you might like, oh, you know what? Python's really interesting. I like what he was saying. I might take a course online or something. But the point is you'll learn, you'll pick up something new, something will stick in your mind. And, you're able to sit down in this talk and enjoy it rather than stand at the back in a crowded room. You can see that talk later online, the one that was packed.
Exactly. You don't need to follow the herd all the time, right? If you follow the herd, you're going to be just one more. So that's a very good lesson. And that's a lesson that Steve Jobs applied in his career, right? He went to a course that had nothing to do with technology. Like it was something with typing, I don't know, with letters. I forgot the name of the course specifically.
Calligraphy or something like
Calligraphy. Yeah, he went to calligraphy course. And then, he was able to design the MacBook, and it was a big success. So that's the power of not, following the herd all the time and thinking out of the box.
He didn't go to a, hardware design course. The calligraphy course gave him some design thinking and concepts, which he then later applied to the design of the products, or is thinking about the design of the products. So yeah, it was calligraphy, it was letters, but clearly it helped. Apple products are Apple products. They're iconic. So
yeah, it is only possible with someone who has this open mind to learn new things. And that's the way we are creative, right? So
yeah, it's all about getting new perspectives in life on things.
Yeah. So Vincent, you also became one of the organizers of the Java Champions group, right? And I'd like to know how was the experience, how you got there. We briefly talked about this part of your career, but let's go a little bit deeper into it.
So the Java Champions program was started by Sun Microsystems in, I don't know whenever they started it, as a way to both have the community evangelize for Java on behalf of Sun. When it came out, it was an adoption phase, clearly. They needed a way to get the word out, as a way to have some kind of unidirectional feedback on the product from people that were expert users. And as a way of recognizing people that were prominent with using the language and technology. So, and then when Oracle bought Sun, and then they took it over and they became the administrators of the Java Champion Program, which at the time when I joined Oracle 2017, I can't remember, maybe about 200 people globally, maybe a little less. And the Java Champion Program is some of the expert programs that Microsoft and Google and others do. You need to qualify for by just doing stuff, producing content. Maybe there's an interview and well enough. But the Java Champion Program is administered by the community. The community nominates other community members to be Java champions based on a number of different criteria: thought leadership, independent voice. There's 5. Why don't I know them off the top of my head? Anyway, so when I joined Oracle in developer marketing, one of my roles was to be the administrator for this program, which basically meant, as a job thing, there wasn't really that much to do. I would make sure when there was someone was nominated, I'd inform the mailing list. We'd go through a voting period and all this. There's some admin to do there, facilitate discussions. When somebody got confirmed, I'd send them shirt, jacket, and all this kind of stuff. And then I'd run a gathering once a year, a Java Champion Summit once a year. So that was fun. That was interesting. And I knew a lot of them already because of my role as a conference organizer. I met a lot of the people that are already Java champions. But it was a privilege, actually, to be able to communicate with this group. And then whenever I went to a conference as part of the Oracle team, in my community role, I would go to conferences and just be part of the community and talk to people. And, I would arrange some kind of gathering in the evening for any of the Java champions that were there, the drinks, dinner, what have you. So that was a really interesting role. Again, it's an administrative role, but I took the opportunity to be even more involved in the community than I had been at that point.
Yeah, I really miss the Java Champions gathering. And I don't really know if that wasn't a good business decision for Oracle. Do you have any thoughts on that? If we can talk about that, obviously.
When Java 1 turned into Code 1, we still did it for a couple of years. And then, we had pandemic and everything changed. And then kind of Java 1 went away. And then it came back. And Oracle has been doing it. They did it this year. They had a Java leaders kind of like meeting. They did it in 2023 in Vegas. They had a Java leaders kind of summit, bringing the people together, both Java champions and Jug leaders group combined. So they haven't completely let this go. It's just very challenging for a company like this, like an enterprise company, to be able to fund all this. So one of the things that used to happen was that we were typically the only people that were there were speaking at the conference, and they were making their own way there. Okay. But we did have edge cases and found ways to invite other members from the community that wanted to come and fund their travel through the programs that we ran. Now, that got more challenging post-pandemic. So there are reasons why large companies, for compliance and what have you, can't really do that type of funding anymore. So they haven't completely forgotten about it. It's just changed a little bit. I think that it was probably one of the most valuable parts of the program, was current to this day. And the Java Champions Summit, when we used to, when Sun did it and when Oracle did it pre-COVID, we'd go in and we'd have a day of technical discussions from the product team. Brian Getz would come, Mark Reinhold would come, product architects would come and give us updates as to what was going to be announced in the keynotes later that week at Java 1 or Code 1. And we'd all have to sign NDAs, et cetera, because we couldn't talk about it because we got, preview. So that was nice. And then we'd have technical talks by Oracle experts, by the Java team, the platform or language experts, and talks from the community. And then we'd all go out to dinner, drinks, and have a fun time together. The point is, that day together as a group was one of the most valuable parts of the Java Champion Program. These people do see each other throughout the year at various things, various conferences, but not in as large a group as that. But, we've endeavored to do this at DevNexus for the last, 4 years, 5 years. We've run a Java Champion Summit and a Jug Leaders Summit at DevNexus because we don't have the same kind of hurdles that that Oracle might have in terms of funding some of these people to come if they're not already speaking at the event or the company's not paying for them.
Yeah, that was super nice. I remember those meetings were still happening when I became a Java champion back in 2018. But as I remember, it was only 1 year that I was able to use the benefit.
Yeah.
So when they said, "Oh, it's not happening anymore," I said, "Oh no." That was so cool. Come on.
Yeah, I remember when you became a Java champion because Barry from the Dublin Jug had me. Well, I asked him if I could send you a little video that he played announcing it. Do you remember that?
Yeah, it was amazing. Thank you so much for creating the video. And I still have it. I have it
I
recorded in
saw
my
it the other
machine.
day in my files somewhere. I was searching for something. I was like, "Well, what's that?" Oh yeah, I remember that.
It was great. Yeah, it was amazing. Like, it was like, how can I say? I had no words from what the Java champion community did to me, and especially Venkat Subramani, right? Because he did it in such an amazing way. It was perfectly orchestrated, right? Like, he asked you for the video beforehand, and he came here to Dublin to give a talk in Equifax, which is the company I was working for at the time.
Hmm.
And he gave a talk in Equifax. He invited me to go there to see his talk. And then Venkat Subramanian told me, "Hey, Rafael, I need some help from you here. Can you give me some help on my laptop?" Then I went there, like, I had no idea what was going on. I said, "Okay, well, obviously I'm gonna help you, Venkat." And then I went there, I helped him, like, he said, "Oh, just scroll down the screen, do whatever." And then your video showed up, like, officially stating that I became a Java champion. And then I said, "Okay, what's going on? Like, really?" Then I got, "Oh my God, that's amazing." And I got so happy. Like, I had really no words for this amazing gift. And another detail is that he did it in my birthday.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was such a special day, like one of
That's
the best
cool.
days of my life. Yeah, definitely. Like, such an honor. Like, Venkat is an amazing person. Like, I have no
Yeah.
words for him. Like, like he's beyond human. He's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and you were part of this,
Yeah.
I
It
would
was
say, ceremony. Yeah. So,
Yeah, and I guess that was in my because that was in my capacity as the Java champion program guy when I was at Oracle that happened. So yeah, that was fun.
it was awesome. For me, it was unbelievable. For me, it was amazing.
Well deserved. Well deserved.
Thank you. Awesome. And, well, some of my mentees, they want to give talks, and some other developers, they want to give talks, but they don't want to give talks in conferences because, most developers don't want to expose themselves, even though I strongly believe it's important. It's an important skill for everyone, right? Like, if they really want to expand their career and to become like those developers, to have the highest salaries or who are the most well-known, who are the biggest references, giving talks is a rest assured way to get there. But still, it's a very good skill for developers who want to share knowledge within their company, right? Because if you share knowledge in your company, you become a reference very quickly.
Yep.
That's what happened. That's what it happened with me. When I started giving talks in my company, people just immediately changed the way they were seeing me. Like, in their minds, like, I had exponential growth just because I gave the talk.
Yeah.
So it's an extremely valuable skill. So that's my perspective. And obviously, like, it's good also to give back to the community, right? Good to improve communication skills. But I would like to hear your perspective. Why should developers take the effort for giving talks? Because I know this is very challenging for developers.
Sure. It is. It is. It's challenging for most people, I think. And I mean, there's several ways that people do this. I know people that have gone through Toastmasters training. Are you familiar with Toastmasters? Toastmasters is this international organization where you go on a course and it teaches you how to be a public speaker. Okay. I don't know how long the course is, but it's very well structured. I know several people have gone through it because they just wanted to have that skill. Okay. Because it helped them present internally in meetings like you've done. So there's that formal way to do it. Okay. The other way, so say I'm a developer and I'm sitting here and I'm working for Equifax or Chase Bank or whoever, or American Airlines, and it doesn't really matter. And, I've always wanted to give a talk, but I have no idea how to even start. Okay. No idea how to even start. Well, the way to start it is really with your local community, with your Java users group. It doesn't have to be Java. It could be Python or data science or testing, whatever it is you're interested in. It doesn't matter. If you're part of that community and you're engaged and you go to the meetings, then just tell the organizer you'd like to present. And you can present a lightning talk. Okay. This doesn't have to be a 4-hour long thing. All right. A lightning talk is an 8 to 10 minute talk on a subject. And one interesting thing to understand about speaking at your jug or at a conference is you don't need to be an expert in this thing. You need to be knowledgeable and passionate. Okay, that's what carries it. And your unique experience in life will carry the whole thing. You're going to have a unique perspective or take on how you present things, how you present information, slides, and the way that you speak that no one else has. Everyone's different, right? So don't think that you need to be an expert in Kubernetes or DevOps. Well, DevOps is a large term. Kubernetes. In order to give a talk on Kubernetes, you need to be knowledgeable and passionate about it. Okay, that's what's going to make it interesting. That and your perspective. So start with your local community. Go to, if it's Java, okay, like it probably is, or if it's web development, because you build websites of the size and you start to use Tailwind CSS and you really like it for some reason, I don't know. Go give a talk on that, about something that you applied with Tailwind or Vue.js or whatever front-end framework you're using. Again, doesn't have to be Java. But just put something together. It doesn't have to be long. You don't have to put that pressure on you to give a long talk on X, Y, or Z. It can be a short one. And most meetup organizers will welcome you to do that. You come to me as a jug organizer, or I run other meetups too, and say, hey, I'd love to do a little lightning talk before the main talk next month. I'm like, sure. What is it? Okay, that sounds cool. Off you go. Have at it. We'll record it for you if you want to. So, you have a recording of it so you can see yourself. So do that. Okay. And I've seen plenty of people that have started that way at our Java user group. They've given a lightning talk. They've expanded the lightning talk into a longer format, 40-minute, 50-minute talk. They've submitted to our conference, our local conference, and we've taken the talk it's not just Java user group, it's others. And then they've kept doing this and applying to other conferences. And I've seen people fast forward 3 or 4 years and they're invited to keynote internationally. I've seen it happen. Now, it's not going to happen all the time, but it does start with you taking the first step, like talking to the person next to you in line and putting together a short talk, a lightning talk. Again, you don't need to be an expert, just knowledgeable and passionate. Okay. And then build on it. Well, how do I do that? How do I design the slides? And okay, well, first write the story. Okay. Understand that most people are visual. Follow best practices for slides. Just Google that. It's easy. A lot of people put way too much text on the slide, way too many bullet points. People are reading your slides at that point. They're not listening to you. Or repeating, they're just reading. Just follow best practices. I've done that with my talks when I first started putting them together. What are the best practices for making engaging slide presentations? And I watched a bunch of videos and I like this from this video, I like that from that video, I like that from video. Eventually I have my own style. Okay, by taking elements of other things. So start that way. Okay, it's not easy to do. It's easier to do than you'd think. Okay, and you don't have to be an expert. You'd be surprised that, and you might be thinking, well, I'm just gonna feel like an imposter because I'm on the stage, I'm in the front of the room. You'd be surprised how many of the top speakers you see at these large developer events feel this way, like they have imposter syndrome. Okay. I was at a speaker on conference a few years ago, and that was one of the unconference topics was imposter syndrome. So I went to that because I'm not an engineer. I can't talk about Loom. And yeah, a lot of the speakers there were like, yeah, I feel this way. My perspective on imposter syndrome, again, is you don't need to be an expert. You just need to be knowledgeable and passionate. And the other thing is that you don't need to affect everyone in the room. Okay. If one person in that audience, however big that audience is, could be 5 people, could be 50, it doesn't matter. If one person has an aha moment and goes, oh, that's a really good point. I like that. You've done, your job is done as a speaker. You don't have to positively affect everyone. And you're never going to be the expert in the room anyway. I know expert speakers that when they give talks, there's people that know way more about it in that room than they do. All right. So get over the fact that you're never going to be the expert in the room. Okay. And the other thing about that aha moment, if you're giving, and this applied to this uncommon session I went to, that one thing that one person had that aha moment about is probably not going to be about some new concept that you taught them about, because that's what your talk is. It's going to be about some old fundamental thing that you reminded them the importance of because it was relevant to the topic. And they go, oh yeah, I need to do more of that. You just explained the use case where that's so important. I need to go back and I need to do more unit testing. I need to pay more attention to frameworks. I need to make more attention to design patterns. And so again, you don't need to be the expert in the room, or you're never going to be the expert in the room. So you don't need to be an expert. You just need to be knowledgeable and passionate. And the fact that you are unique will carry that talk.
Awesome. And in your opinion, what are the main reasons developers should give talks, should make the effort to give talks?
Well, the best way to learn is to teach, frankly, is an old saying.
I agree.
If you try to teach others to do something, you will learn more about it yourself. Also, it's just a great skill to have. And it could be important for you in your career to have those kind of references on your CV or your resume. It doesn't have to be. Not everyone has to be a speaker. Okay. And you know what? You may not enjoy it. You may not want to do it at all. That's fine. But it can be an advantage in a tech career to be a speaker or have some not everyone speaks all the time for their whole career. Some people do, but somebody to get paid to do that. Developer advocates get paid to do that for a living. That might be your chosen career path at some point. You might decide, I really like speaking. How do I do more of this with tech companies? Well, how do I combine being able to build demos, write code, and speak? Well, that's what developer advocates do. But you need to do speaking to get one of those jobs. So that's a way to get one of those jobs.
Yeah, those are good reasons, definitely. And also to improve.
It's not for everybody. I get that.
Yeah. But at least, it's useful to have the skill of giving talks internally for the company. Doesn't need to be necessarily a speaker for conferences, but at least to share knowledge within the company. This is a very important skill for intermediate or senior developers.
Yeah, the ability to communicate clearly and concisely is vital in business generally. And it is going to be one of the things that makes the difference in someone's career in terms of them going to the next level. Okay. It's certainly one of the things that if you're in your career path, you would like to consider leadership roles like management or higher than that, then being able to communicate clearly and concisely is going to be vital. Now, not everybody needs to do that. Again, some people will be happy to write code until they retire because that's what they love doing, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're someone where you think, okay, well, my career trajectory, I would love to have leadership type roles like being a team lead or a manager or director and so on in my organization or in other organizations, then it is vitally important that you are able to communicate clearly and concisely. Yeah. And the way to learn those skills, one of the ways to learn those skills is to give presentations. Again, internal presentations or external presentations. A lot of companies are set up, like I know Citibank, for example, they have global initiative, developer initiatives internally in the company to have people from inside the org present to their peers. And for example, in their big developer center in Tampa, Florida, they've got a whole conferencing area. And there's a guy that runs that brings in speakers from throughout the US and throughout the organization every month to present on a topic. ADP in Atlanta does the same thing. So a lot of enterprise companies do have these initiatives where they would like their staff to present to other staff, once a month or something like that. A brown bag lunch, they call it in the US. I think they call it something similar in Europe. So yeah,
It's brown bag as well.
yeah.
Brown bag.
So
The same.
so the opportunities are there to do the presenting.
Yeah, definitely. And I did a brown bag as well in some of the companies I was working for, and it's a great way to get started. Definitely.
Why is it called a brown bag lunch? Is it because you have to bring your lunch in a brown bag or what?
That's a good question. I think it means that while you're having lunch, usually in a brown bag, like to eat like maybe the wrap or the sandwich, you are also watching the talk. I assume that's the reason.
Why isn't it a green bag lunch? Well, if there's only green.
Because usually the bags for the lights typically are brown.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, it's a weird name.
I've always wondered that.
Yeah. And what do you consider a top tier content for talk?
Well, it's all relative, of course.
Or it could be even like a top tier talk, like a talk that you say, well, wow, that's an amazing talk.
Again, it's all relative, I think.
Relative.
Yeah, I think if you come away, all right. So when I go to the movies, all right, and I go see an action movie or something, or whatever movie, I come out of that movie and go, was I entertained or not? Okay. Yes, I was entertained and I enjoyed myself. Some people go to that movie and they go, well, I don't like the way that the director did this, or, I don't like the way that the music faded here. And I'm very critical about the lighting, and I'm very critical about the plot lines and some of the character arc development. And okay, that's them. I'm like, did I enjoy it or not? Was it a good use of my time or not? The same could be said if I'm going to a talk. Was it a good use of my time or not? Now, everyone's going to have a different perspective on what a good use of their time is. For some people, it's going to be, did the presenter teach me anything I didn't already know about whatever it is that talk that I went to? Yes or no? Now, that presenter could be an expert level presenter. Just happens that a person thinking that way, he can know more. So that person's going to say, well, no, I didn't learn anything. No, that talk was not good. But to someone else's perspective, it was the best talk in the entire world. Okay, because they learned so much more. All right. So it's very hard to say what makes a good talk. I guess if you're presenting, if no one leaves, it's a good sign. Or if people came to start with, that's a good sign. But I don't know. Did you personally get anything out of it? Is going to be, I guess, the general rule of thumb. Now, that person you got out of it thing could be something new you learned, or did you enjoy the way the person spoke and the way that they told their story?
Yeah, storytelling is extremely powerful, and this is something that is pretty useful to develop in talks, because nowadays you have AI, you have many tools that help us do the research about technical content, but the storytelling is what makes the talk stand out, right? Do you have any ideas or any suggestions for developers to improve their storytelling?
I mean, there are, you grab this. This is one of the resources I use. It's called Storyteller Cards or Storyteller Tactics.
Interesting.
And it's a series of cards that basically say, it's on each side. There's several criteria: function, structure, style, recipe, concept. And on the front of this Explore one, for example, it says, that's funny. It says, you can tell us, I can't read it and show it to you. No, it says that's funny. You can see that, right?
That's funny, yeah.
And it says you can tell a great story about your project by finding that's funny moments from your work. Okay. And then on the back, there's some practical examples of that. You know, it could be funny, haha. It could be funny, peculiar. It could be acting funny. Okay. So if I'm developing a talk about testing, not that I know much about testing, but in that example, there could be something funny that happened with some testing that, you know, I'm using a tool, I don't know, what's the browser-based testing thing?
Could be a unit.
Oh, all right, JUnit. I'm using JUnit, okay? And something happened. I was like, oh, that was pretty funny. It happened. I can incorporate that into my story as a way to illustrate how to do something or how not to do something. Okay? So anyway, that's one tactic. But at the end, I think at the end of the day, you have to think about what are you trying to accomplish with this talk? And usually, if you just break it down into a start, a middle, and an end, okay, start, middle, end, audience takeaways. I think it's important to have at the end. These are the key things that you should take from here. Establish what's that's going to be in your head, and just start writing things down. Whenever I develop a new talk, I just start putting stuff on slides. I don't even write it on a notepad. I just start putting it on slides because it gets me thinking about other things going forward. And that gets you thinking about other things going forward. And the slides just, you know, words on a slide and then words on the next slide and then words on the next slide. Then I might start thinking about an image and an image and an image. I do it that way.
Yeah, this storyteller tactics is very interesting. You can find anywhere.
Yeah.
Like basically, you get a card and it gives you an example. And then you can apply this example to your life, to your story. Is that how it works?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
So that's one method. Okay.
one method.
But look, I need to, you know, I wanted to learn how to do this when I first started doing it. I watched some videos. I just typed in, how do you create a presentation? How do I create a presentation from scratch? How do I create a comms presentation from scratch? They all pretty much say the same thing, but people, there'll be different perspectives on how to do it. And okay, I like this from this video. I like that from that video. I like that. And then you take it and you put it all together for yourself.
Yeah, that's a good insight. Like to learn from other speakers and gather what's best for you, what you like, and then create your own style.
I mean, it might be that you've gone to talks or you've seen talks online where the speaker used a lot of hand. I know someone who hand draws these illustrations and they're really cool. And that may resonate with you. You might go, oh, I'd like to do that as well. They're not very good drawings. They don't have to be.
Yeah, that's very interesting as well. Like to draw is very different. I never seen that before, but it seems cool, right? So very cool. And you mentioned about Toastmasters. It's not the first time I heard about it. So is Toastmasters kind of an online course, or you can have only in the US? How it works exactly?
I think they're an international organization. I don't know if you can do it just online. There's a very different dynamic when you're over, you know, Zoom online like this or Teams, whatever it is, than if you're standing in front of a room full of people. Okay. So I think the most effective way to do it is in person. I know that I could do Toastmasters here in Atlanta if I want. Well, Atlanta's a big city. I'm pretty sure that any major metro area has a Toastmasters group.
Interesting. So I can find a Toastmasters group in Dublin, for example.
I don't see why not.
Okay. So it's kind of a meetup group, or it's like a website?
No, it's like a paid. I know it's a paid program. I don't know how much it costs. But again, that's just one method, you know.
Toastmasters.
Dublin. I mean, you know what? Yeah, I'm typing something into Google. Dublin Club. Yeah, they meet on Thursdays.
Nice.
In Bustforce Hotel. There you go.
Interesting. Yeah, they do have one.
I might actually do this. I think depending on how much it costs, I might actually do this.
It
membership.
seems very cheap. It's like $60 a year.
Okay, well, there you go. I think it's more the time commitment because my understanding, if I remember correctly, and I don't always, from a friend that's done this, is that you're given various assignments that you have to go and do, and then when you go to the club meet, sometimes they say, "Well, here you need to present on this topic for like 20 minutes. Here's the topic, go. No research, just go."
Nice. I like it.
Actually, there's a conference session that a friend of mine runs, and I've seen them before, called PowerPoint Karaoke. I don't know if you've heard of this.
I did it.
You did PowerPoint karaoke?
I did it, yes.
So
It
for
was a
those
lot
of
of
you
fun.
that are unfamiliar, PowerPoint karaoke is you will go on the stage and you'll have like 5 minutes, I think. Is it 3 minutes? Something like that.
5 minutes. Had
5
5 minutes.
And on the screen will get projected random photos from the internet.
It's very funny.
And you just need to talk and try and tie those random images together in some kind of narrative. And images can be so different. It's hilarious. But it puts
It's
you on the
hilarious.
spot. You got to think really hard and fast about this. It's very enjoyable to watch. It's very stressful to do and enjoyable, if you ask me.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun on these karaoke talks.
Yeah. Maybe you should do one at the Dublin Jug one month. You know what? I'm
Could
going to
be.
do the Jug.
Yeah, that's a
We
good
may
idea.
have to do that for one of our meetings this year. Just do PowerPoint karaoke.
That's a good idea because it puts developers and people on the spot and it makes them improve their presentation skills.
Again, it's not for everybody, but some people will get a lot out of it, I think.
Definitely, yeah. It was a lot of fun when I did it. Just laughed so much.
Where did you do that?
Where?
Yeah.
I did it with Bruno. So
Oh,
I
it's
did it.
at Java 1?
No, we went to a big house in Amsterdam, and Bruno Souza was there, and other friends, and we did it. We did the karaoke presentation. Karaoke presentation?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
PowerPoint karaoke.
PowerPoint to karaoke. Yeah, we did it. It was so fun. Was very funny.
Yeah, they did it at Java 1 this year at the reception at the party on the stage there. And they invited people up from the community to do it. It was hilarious.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And Vincent, what kinds of talks should developers submit to have more chances of being accepted in conferences? We had a brief conversation about that, and I feel like the conferences want AI talks because I would say that 90% of the talks are about AI. But I'd like to hear your perspective on that. So, what kind of content they should submit?
Well, don't forget that if you're submitting to a conference, you can submit more than one talk. Okay. Don't just think that I have to submit one. All right. When you're starting out doing this, you might only have one. That's fine. Again, with all the AI stuff now, with Gen AI, with MCPs, with all the stuff that's happening with LLMs and the tools you can attach to it, there's going to be a lot of content being submitted. Okay. By a lot of people that do this for a living. That their sole job now is to focus on how to AI enable whatever it is the company paid product is, or the open source product is, if it's an open source thing. So if it's an AI conference, yes, AI stuff. But again, if it's a general developer conference, then again, don't forget the fundamentals, right? Because there are going to be other talks picked up there. All right. And again, as long as you're knowledgeable and passionate, you don't have to be an expert. That's what you should talk about. So I don't really like the way that seems to be all that's getting picked up these days, but conferences can't, unless it's an AI conference, conferences in our Java ecosystem can't afford to just have AI talks. There's going to be a fair amount, but it's not going to be the only thing, right? If I'm just thinking about, generally speaking, for people that are experienced at presenting and have talks, maybe things along the lines of migrating legacy code bases from one version of Java to another. There's tools that will do that for you. You can use those tools, talk about those tools, but there's other ways to do it. Maybe some of the issues about workload, because companies are always trying to cut down on their tech debt and save money, and workloads are important with the JVM. So maybe ways to reduce that. Those are the types, again, but these are fundamentals, fundamental engineering problems that people have to face day in, day out. And like me as a conference organizer, I want more of those things to be able to present to the audience, not less.
Yeah. But it seems to me that the most of the conferences, they don't care about the fundamentals. And like if you submit a talk about design patterns or algorithms, microservices, it's kind of the fundamentals nowadays because so many companies are using microservices. I have the impression that they are rejecting a lot of those talks.
Yeah.
And another topic that I know it's rejected a lot often is about career, right? And this is my focus currently. And when I submit a talk about career, it's really difficult to get accepted because in most conferences, they want technical content.
Well, it depends if they have some kind of, leadership track or community track. If they do, then there's a chance that those types of talks will be accepted. All the talks I do are non-technical. So if I'm not going to even submit them for a purely technical conference, unless there's a track that's dedicated to community or to leadership or something like that, I'm not even going to submit a talk there. Those talks are valuable. They're very valuable. We had a leadership track at DevNexus this year for the first time. It was very well attended, very well attended. So I hope it's something that we can continue with. Although the format of that conference is going to change a little bit for next year. But I hope we can continue with that track.
Nice. That's very good because, like I said, it's a way for developers to also expand their thoughts. Otherwise, they're going to be always studying technical stuff and they will be always focusing on, technologies. It's important, obviously, but it's not the only thing that will take them to the next level. Definitely not.
Yeah. And, other people's thoughts and perspectives and experience in those kind of soft skills type areas are important. You could go to a talk and somebody says something that really resonates with you based on where you are in your life, where you are in your career, where you live in your country, whole bunch of different reasons. And it could be way more valuable than any of the technical talks to your career as a software engineering professional at whatever level.
Yeah, and I made this mistake for a long time in my career, right? Because like back in the days when I was working in a company in São Paulo, I naively thought that, if I study those technologies and if I'm really good on those technologies, I will get promoted. And then I was focusing, like every day I was studying a lot. I was studying like every day after work. I was studying somewhere around 3 hours a day, right? 3 hours a day, and sometimes I was using my weekends. And then I noticed that developers who were less experienced than me, technically, they were earning a lot more than me. They were earning the double, the triple. There was a couple of them who were earning even the quadruple of my salary. And some of those developers, they were even like less experienced than me in a technical level. But they were a lot better on communication, on how to show their work. They were much better on negotiating their salaries. They were a lot better than me. Also, sharing their knowledge. And their code was really bad. I could see the code of one of those people, one of those developers who were earning 4 times my salary. And he was basically using the design pattern of copy and paste. So he was basically copying and pasting code. And he was even trying to teach me coding, which was kind of funny, right? And no, that was a big lesson to me. I noticed, okay, like, I'm studying so much those technical subjects, it's not what I need. I need to go beyond code. Then I started going to conferences and, having mentorships, reading books. Then when I started expanding my mind, my career changed. I got a promotion very quickly because I wasn't only focusing on the technical anymore. I started noticing what those developers were doing differently than me. They were able to show their work, and they were able to seem more valuable than me. It's not enough to be valuable. You need to look like valuable, right?
Well, they're all important skills again. And within an organization, in a structure, you had developers and then more senior developers and more senior developers and more senior developers. And then they could transition to architecture, or they could transition to team leadership or management or higher level management, whatever. What everybody wants out of their career is different. Some people want to be the best engineer they can possibly be. And they might not even want to be an architect. They just want to write the best code that they can write for the whole of their career. And they'll get paid well to do that. But if there are other roles in an organization that require other skills other than being the best coder they can possibly be, and those roles pay more, then they're not going to get to those comp levels. So it depends what the drivers are. And there's always a balance between, am I getting paid right? Am I doing the job I want to do, that I like and passionate about? There's this balance, which everybody needs to figure out for themselves. So, and sometimes the only way to get paid more is to change jobs, unfortunately. Look, that's the world we live in. People don't want to talk about it. I'll talk about it. The only way to get that salary rise is just to move companies. And then what happens is your company will end up hiring somebody else in to backfill you and pay them more than they were paying you, or more than you asked for in the salary increase. It's just how organizations work, unfortunately.
Yeah, in some rare cases, it's also possible to negotiate a higher salary in your own company, in the company you are working for, but we know it's more difficult.
Yeah, but then show the value, and sometimes the value isn't just, where's the ROI for me paying you more money? Yes, you're really great, all right, yes, your code's got much better, good. What else? Oh, you started to take more responsibility in terms of how you communicate with the team. You started to mentor other people. You started taking on more of a leadership role. You started taking on more responsibility for things that you weren't asked to do. All those things also contribute to you someone getting that pay rise, not just the fact that they've been there X amount of time and their code got better.
Yeah, they have to be always value focused, right? Mm-hmm. It's not about, I am here for 5 years, I'm having difficulties in my life and blah, blah, blah. This is not value. And this is not even the problem of the company, right? In a conversation for a promotion, you have to say, hey, this is the value I bring to the table. I'm mentoring developers. I helped refactor this code. This code was a mess. Now, with this refactoring, I improved productivity by, 50%. Now developers can, they spend half time to maintain that software. How I reduced bugs, right? There are many things you can tell that you really created value, that you created impact. And if you did something that you saved cost by optimizing a cloud provider service, and that's a very straightforward way to say, hey, I did this thing and I saved, maybe 200K a year.
I say my documentation is great on my projects, but then I was working on something else that someone asked me to look at, and I noticed the documentation was terrible, so I redid it, and now it's awesome. Didn't have to do that, but again, it's showing value.
Exactly.
because you care, ultimately.
Yes. And what do you recommend? What do you recommend the developers to get their talks accepted at conferences? Like, do you think the content, the subject, the title of the talk is the most important, or is it the networking? Is it the reputation?
Well, I think, when you're starting out, especially, it's important. So, and the title. Conference organizers get a lot of abstracts. Okay. And we read them all. We split off into groups, we have committees. However we do it, we review these talks, their abstracts and the titles, etc. Sometimes the titles are terrible and they're way too abstract. Like I was thinking of an example of this earlier, and I pulled one up on Sessionize, which I wanted to.
Oh, nice.
It
Real
was
examples. That's amazing.
yeah. Well, I pulled up one that I was looking through DevNexus for this year, and the title of the talk was, "Can your Java handle the load?" And it's actually a really good talk, okay, on workload management for the JVM. All right. But as an organizer, it would catch my attention more if the title was different, because I've got to scan these and then I review them. Now, I read it and I reviewed it. Sometimes people might not be that thorough. They might just go by the talk. Can my Java handle the load? I would call it something else, like optimizing workload for the JVM or something. All right. Now, immediately you know what that talk's about. And that's important also if it appears on a program at a conference, because people are scrolling through what talk should I go to, what talk should I go to. And most of the time attendees are not paying, they're not reading all the abstracts. They're scanning the titles and this time slot and that time slot and that time slot. And if they see a title that looks interesting, then they might go look at the abstract. So you've also got to be thinking in terms of when people are scanning these, if the title is way too abstract, they might just look over it. So, what's going to catch my attention more in this use case, or what your attention would it be? Can your Java handle the load, or would it be optimizing workload for the JVM? What's more descriptive? If I'm just glancing at it.
JVM, obviously.
Yeah. So these are things to be thinking about when you are titling stuff. And we've actually picked up talks and changed titles for people, like contact them and say, look, I hate the title of this talk. Here are some recommendations. Oh, I like that. Let's call it that. Or we've asked them to rework their abstract as well, because they do this a lot. So read between the lines. It's like, oh, well, yeah, it's not very, conceptually, I see that this could be a really good talk, but it's not presented in a great way that's engaging. Let's ask them to redo it. So you've got to think about, number one, what is the conference? Okay. And what are the tracks? And your content needs to be relevant to that conference and the tracks that they have. We get so many talks that are just so not relevant to our conference at all and wouldn't fit in any of the tracks. We just, oh, well, thanks. We just ignore them. I mean, what could, and sometimes people ask for feedback and I'm like, well, it's just not relevant to our audience or even the conference. So sorry. But people do send those out. I mean, maybe they use agents or whatever to send out their talks to everything. It can happen.
What examples of a talk that has nothing to do?
Oh, it's usually, I don't know. I can scan one on when I only got to like page 8. There's like 28 pages. But we usually get them from people that, they have a consulting firm and they tout themselves as a top international speaker on organizational development. Sake of argument. And then their admin assistant will send us their talk. Dr. Jones would like to talk at your conference about organizational development in developing countries. Yeah, it's not relevant.
So basically, they just want to sell their products and then.
Well, I'm sure they're great talks for the right audience, but not enough. If that person who sent us that talk understood what our conference is, they would never have sent it. Like how many emails do you get from recruiters with stuff that's completely irrelevant? I get them all the time. People asking me if I want to do, like Python development. Why me? I don't even have that as a word anywhere on my LinkedIn profile. the word Python. I had one thing where like the recruiter reached out because this ed tech startup I worked at in Bloom, one of the open source tools we were using was Apache Solr. So when I think at one point I listed out the tech stack in that, in that LinkedIn when I worked for InBloom, I listed out what, the tech stack was, and Solr was there. And so I get this email like 10 years later. I see you're an expert with Apache Solr. Would you like to have this contract? I was like, dude, it's mentioned one time as part of a tech stack 10 years ago and never again. And you think you see I'm an expert in that? Really? Anyway, what I'm trying to make is that they don't do enough research. They kind of use this scattergun approach to Dr. Jones's talk on organizational development to send it out. So that whatever conferences you apply to, your talk has to be relevant to one of the tracks that they have. Again, those tracks: architecture, agile, DevOps, testing, security, whatever it is.
Awesome. Very good. And what should developers tell their companies to help them, persuade the company to cover the flight, or like the conference ticket costs? It's usually covered by the conference when you are a speaker, but the flight ticket and the staying, it's not covered most times. So what would you recommend? Yeah, if you're a speaker, like some companies do cover the flight costs, and other conferences, they will cover your hotel, your staying, but others won't cover that, right? So how would you recommend developers to talk with their managers and say, hey, can you help me to cover those costs that I can give a talk in this conference?
Well, again, where's the ROI for the company? So that manager is already giving you, see, if this isn't part of your job description to do this, okay, you're not in developer advocacy or relations or whatever, or you're not part of the product team who does part of the job is to speak, then your manager is already giving you time AFK to go to the conference. Okay, now it might even be part of your job description, and that's fine. But if not, so that you don't have to take vacation, they're already giving you a couple of days, 3 days, it could even be a week. Who knows, depending on what the conference is. So, where's the ROI? It depends who you talk to. If you're talking to your direct manager, and maybe you're just trying to make a case for that person to ask somebody else. So you're going to be at that conference. You work for Stripe, or you work for Ford Motor. I don't know, Ford Cars, Ford. And, where's the ROI? Well, we're just going to talk about technology and talk about Java and JVM. It's not really a Ford use case because maybe you're not even allowed to talk about what you do for Ford, because it's not public. But, you can say, look, I'm going to have all my slides. I'm going to be there. I'm going to have my Ford engineering. I know other companies have this Ford t-shirt on. I'm going to have all my slides are going to have Ford in the people at this conference. The audience is going to know that I'm a senior engineer at Ford or Stripe or Chase or whoever it is. That's great branding for the company. The talk should be recorded. My job title of the company is going to be on there. We can share that video. People are going to be able to associate all the cool things that we're doing in technology with Ford or Stripe or whoever it is, the company name. Okay. There's a benefit there for someone who recognizes it. Now maybe it's not their manager. It could be their manager's manager, the case be made to. But at least it gives that you as a starting point is to say, here's the ROI for the business. Okay. Our branding is going to be in front of X number of people at this event, on my backpack, on my shirt, or what have you as well. They're going to know that I represent Ford Motor or whoever it is, and they're going to associate this talk I'm doing about leading edge technology or fundamental technology or whatever with Ford Motor. That's valuable to us. That's one way to do it. Now, sometimes there's no funding. What can you do? If the conference organizer can't or won't cover it for whatever reason, then you need to cover it yourself. And I've done that in the past. I've covered my own travel because I wanted to present at some of these things, and I've felt it's important for my career to have that other reference point on there. So sometimes it'll work for you, sometimes it won't. You just need to make the decision on if you can fund it, or if if it's not going to be covered by your organization or the conference, whether or not it's worth it enough to you to fund it yourself.
Yeah, most times it's worth it. Like even more if it's a big conference. But one tactic I used to use for the companies I was working for was that it would help them to hire highly skilled developers. Because usually the developers who go to conferences, those are usually the best, right? Those are the committed developers. Those are the developers who want to grow in their careers, who are engaged, who are always learning, who are always growing. So sometimes it worked, other times it didn't. Because they said, oh, but you were going to the US giving a talk. How can we hire people from the US? It's not possible.
Yeah. Or they say, we're not hiring anyone right now. And they're really only thinking about right now, unfortunately, like today.
Yeah, and then like the only option, like if you have this answer, the only option could be like you said, like it's good marketing for the company. I'll be wearing the company's t-shirt, or I will, I don't know, show the name of the company on the slides. And like could be like a reasonable to say, hey, it's
Yeah.
I'm
And
helping the brand.
it also depends on on the perspective of the person you're asking for this funding is. You know, sometimes the person you're talking to about getting this funding may not care. They may not, and sometimes they will. You just don't know. Maybe somebody else in the organization would care, but do you know who they are? I don't know.
Yeah. So you have to
It
be
can be
prepared.
challenging, but it's not an unsurpassable hurdle. And every time it's going to be on a case by case basis, I think, unless there is something that where it is part of your job description that it's required that you speak at 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever conferences a year.
Yeah. And we briefly talked about communication skills. So do you have any suggestion for developers to improve on their communication skills? I know that we discussed about Toastmasters, we discussed about some other things we can do to improve our communication skills, but can we go a bit deeper into it? And like you might have more things to share on that, because communication skills, the more we grow, it's more and more important, right?
Well, everyone has a different style, number one, I think. So sometimes it's hard to say, well, in the context of internal in the company when you're doing presentations or want to do slides, or external if you're speaking at a conference or just talking to other people that, externally. Everyone has a different style and it might vary from situation to situation. What can you do? The only thing to do is to practice. Look, it's hard. We talked about at the beginning. How do you turn to the person next to you? How do you create that first presentation, or how do you first get on a stage? And these are all the ways that you can communicate. How do you practice? You know what? When it comes to written communication, this is something I love. It's very easy to write a lot of stuff. Okay. There's a great quote by, I think it's Mark Twain. Mark Twain, if you're not familiar, is an American author. It's actually not by Mark Twain, but it's attributed to him wrongly. It's like, one of those things, wrong answers only. Anyway, the quote is, if I had more time, I would be brief. If I had more time, I would be brief. So unpack that. It takes way more time in written and actually verbal communication to be concise and bring your point across than it does to be verbose and write a lot of crap and say the same thing. One of the good things about X, or Twitter before it was X, actually, I guess it's still a character limit unless you pay them money. Well, how many? Is it 240 characters? I can't remember.
280.
I use it so rarely these days because I don't want to talk about why. 280 characters, okay? For you to get a point across in 280 characters, you really have to pay attention. You know, in your mind, you got what you want to say, and then you need to say it in a very short character space. You've really got to pay attention to what you say. If you know, and sometimes it's like it's really hard to get that across. That's the thing, and you have to think about it a lot. Now, if you have like unlimited space, you could just roll that stuff. You just write a whole bunch of stuff and say what you're going to say, but it's going to take you way more time to think about what to write in 280 characters. So a really good exercise when you think about trying to improve written communication and getting your thoughts down on, you might need to present some paragraphs on documentation, for example. I don't know, is just to write it all out and then just pare it all down to like half and try and get the point across. Takes way more time. But if you can do that, it's a good way to practice written communication.
That's true. And nowadays we even have AI that can facilitate that even more, right? Obviously, we need to review. It's not, oh, AI writes this thing to me.
You can.
You have to.
But you can't rely on it. You know, I do use that. I say sometimes, make this more concise. The thing with that type of Gen AI is you already have to know what you want to say. Okay. And then you say, make it more concise. So it reduces it by half. And then you've got to review it closely to make sure that it's actually still getting the point across in the way that you would. So if you just use what it sends you, you don't know if it could be hallucinating or something, like as that does a lot.
Yeah. Like sometimes you create a prompt and then AI will generate those weird texts that has nothing to do from what you asked for. So you need to always review very carefully to see if there is anything that makes no sense. Or like sometimes AI use those horrible words, like it's clear that it's AI, so it's not perfect.
I remember I saw a reel, some guy created a content calendar for an email marketing campaign. Okay. Now it was a video, and this person talked really fast, but he talked about how he wrote this prompt. So I rewatched it about 100 times, and I wrote down like another sentence every single time I watched it because I couldn't copy it. It was a video, right? I couldn't see the text, or whatever. I could see the text or I could hear it. And then I created a prompt to create a content calendar for an email marketing campaign for one of my conferences. And I wanted to send an email for the first month. It was like for the first month, it was like, or 2 months, it was like once a week or once every 2 weeks, and then once a week, and then twice a week. And this was like for over a 4-month period or something. And I ended up writing this prompt. It took me like an hour to write this prompt. Okay. And in there, and I was like, okay, I want subject line options for an A/B testing campaign for email. I want on these certain specific days to highlight certain things like the late prices start or the last chance, or I want you to give me 3 different copy suggestions for the email based on the subject line. But once I'd written the prompt, the damn thing spit it out in like a picosecond in a downloadable format. I was like, oh my God. Now, it took me nearly an hour to write the prompt, but it would have taken me 4 or 5 hours to create this calendar, get it right.
Wow.
Now, I didn't get it completely right, but it was a really good place to start, and an excellent place for me to start. Anyway, the point is, you can't just rely on what Gen AI produces for you. You have to. It's a great productivity tool, but you really need to, know what you want.
Exactly. Create a good prompt and make sure that the answer is correct as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. And do you know any books that are valuable for Java developers or for developers in general? It could be any kind of book that you say, okay, this book is a good one that will help developers in their careers.
Because we all, communicate cross-functionally for the most part. And in the world we live in, we increasingly communicate across time zones and countries and cultures, etc.
Yeah.
And understanding that is really important, especially for communication. Like,
Yes.
I actually keep this on my desk. There's a book called The Culture Map.
Oh, this book was already recommended by other Java champions
There
here
you go.
in
So
this.
The Culture Map. Highly recommend
Yeah.
it. And it's not very thick. There's not really any pictures in it. Well, maybe one or two. But I like this. I come from a pretty multicultural background. My father was from the Caribbean. My mother was from Italy. I grew up in London, live in the US now. Traveled a lot of places in the world, but so I've seen a lot of different culture. But I think that book puts it in a really good. It's an easy read too. It's not a hard read about the importance of what you need to pay attention to when communicating with people across different cultures. So, and I guess that ties into being able to communicate better as well. So I would highly recommend that to anybody, not just a developer. That's something that gave me some really good perspectives. Again, that word perspectives, which have helped me in my career. Now, it's not about just reading the book and applying everything. No, you take what you need, you see what's relevant to you in your situation and where you are in life and what you do, and you apply your own perspectives to all that. That's why it's a good book, I think.
Yeah, I really like this book, and this book is even more important to me because I live in Dublin, and Dublin is a very multicultural country. And any place I go, I see people from everywhere in the world.
Yep.
I see people from Latvia, from Russia, see people from Italy, Spain, like Greece, like, I don't know, China, Mongolia, from everywhere in the world, from the US. I see people from like the whole world. So this book is really very useful, especially to me. It's not only for me, for international developers who work in an international company, but also for even like developers who don't want to work in international project, but they want to travel, right? And suppose they go to a different country, they don't know how to communicate with this culture. And if they have a perspective, if they have at least the minimal information about that culture, then like what could look like an insult or what could look like that the person was being rude, actually it wasn't. It was just a cultural difference.
Yeah. It's like, it's funny. There's that. Have you seen the movie
Dune? No.
Dune. Well,
How do you write it? How do you write it?
Dune. Dune.
D-U-N-E.
Yeah.
Oh, I heard about this movie.
Well,
People say it's really good.
It's a great movie, but the books are even better. It's old sci-fi. But there's a scene in the book where, because basically the main protagonists, they go to a desert planet where water's scarce. Okay. And they go from a very lush sea world to a desert planet where there's just desert. And they wear these suits to recycle the water. They drink that. But anyway, there's a scene where one of the local leaders comes in to talk to the Duke, and they're having a conversation. Then the leader spits on the table. And of course, everyone gets up. The Duke's men get up like it's an insult. And little do they know that's the highest compliment that man could give you, to spit on the table, because he's giving you his water. So
it's fun.
Again,
that's not to the next stream.
Yeah. But the culture map, again, it's all about understanding different perspectives. You're right. What's an insult to one country is an accolade in another. I was in Italy some years ago visiting my brother, and I was in a little coffee shop. This was just post-COVID. I was in the coffee shop because I was waiting for my COVID vaccine or my COVID test result from the pharmacy next door. So I'm in this coffee shop, and this guy comes in, and the lady there, the barista, and they start yelling at each other. They're screaming at each other. And I filmed it because I thought it was funny. And they start screaming, like Italians do.
I know. Yeah. Very passionate.
I posted it online, and some of my friends were like, wow, look at them arguing. But I said, no, they're not. They're actually just having a conversation. I swear. They're not mad at each other. They are just having a conversation. because sometimes that's how you have a conversation in Italy.
That's it. Yeah. Like it seems that they are having a fight, but they're actually just talking.
So I think the culture map book gets people to start thinking with that mindset about, recognizing that the different cultures are very different, and you need to kind of shift your thinking and mindset every time you go somewhere new. And it gives you some strategies for doing that.
Awesome. Yeah, I didn't read this book yet, but I definitely will read
Highly
it.
recommend it.
It's yeah, it must be amazing. And okay, to finalize our conversation, Vincent, what career or life lesson have you learned that would help developers in their lives or careers?
So there's a term in software engineering called eventual consistency, right? Where basically, eventually, all nodes in the database reflect the same thing. Okay,
Yeah.
but it's intentional consistency that's important. All right, being intentional and being consistent is really hard, like really hard. Athletes are both intentional, consistent. They have to be in order to be the best athlete they can be, whether they are Olympic champions or regional medal winners. It doesn't matter. They have to be intentional about their training. They're going to do it, every day, every week, twice a week, every day, whatever it is. And they have to be consistent. They can't just do it for like a couple of weeks and stop and then do it. They're not going to achieve their potential unless they are both intentional and consistent about it. Anyone with kids, raising kids, it's so hard to be both intentional and consistent with kids. Okay. Because they're, habits and the boundaries that you have to put in place for them. It's like, and you're exhausted as a parent and whatever else. It's extremely hard to be both intentional and consistent. And then it goes back to work, being intentional and being consistent. With all the intentionality in the world, unless you have consistent action, it's a waste of time. Oh, I want to do this. I'm going to do this today. And I did it today. Yeah, but you have to do it every day in order to see results over time. So for me, that was it. That was about, almost going full circle. I knew that in order to be a better recruiter, I had to be both intentional. I had to be intentional about learning what a tech stack was that I was talking about, what all the acronyms were, where they sat in the stack, who made them, what they did. I can't write a JSP to save my life, but I do know that you can have custom tags in JSPs. Okay. And if that is a requirement for the job, and I don't know to ask that question, the person I send to the interview isn't going to get that job. Right. Broadly speaking, if client asks me for used to ask me for someone with Spring experience, I need to know to ask, is that Spring Boot, Spring Batch, Spring Data, Spring Cloud, Spring Frame? What do you want? And then let me drill down into there. Otherwise, I'm going to send you a Spring Batch person and you need a Spring Cloud person. If I don't ask, anyway, so as both in my career, intentional about learning all this stuff. And then I was consistent about it. The consistency of showing up at the jug every month. All right, maybe I missed once or twice a year because and I still miss once or twice a year because I'm traveling, but I'm consistent about being there. And I organize, but I would never gotten the opportunity to join the board, never gotten the opportunity to run the conference, never gotten the opportunity to travel to other conferences and network with the people I networked with. And then I wouldn't have gotten the opportunities to work in the companies and the roles I've had without being both intentional about it and being consistent about it. So that's just my own particular example about, going back to where we started the conversation about having a level of intentionality and consistency has helped me accomplish get from, A to B.
Amazing. Amazing. This is very connected to focus, strategy, and consistency. Like intentionality is somewhat connected to what is your focus and what is your intention? Where do you want to reach by taking those actions?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That I strongly believe in that, and this is something I taught so much my mentorship, because I know, like, if you have we know, right? We know that if you have the intention, have the focus, and you are consistent on, that's actually what the champions in the world do. They're very intentional in their training. Like Michael Jordan. Like, how can you meet someone more intentional than Michael Jordan? Like, all of his career, he's been so focused in his skill, right? So a person doesn't become a champion like all of a sudden. There's a plan, there is intention, and there is consistency.
Yeah.
Lots of consistency.
Yeah. But it's very hard.
It is extremely hard. I remember there was a story from Michael Jordan. Like, I saw his documentary, and all of his friends were having fun in a party, and they said, "Hey, Michael Jordan, come here with us." And then he said, "No, tomorrow I wake up at 4 a.m. and I'm gonna train." This is very hard to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Consistently.
Consistency.
For years.
To do that
Years.
consistently for years and years. And like, I'm pretty much sure that Michael Jordan skipped all of those opportunities he had for fun. Right? No, my training is more important. My discipline is more important.
Yeah.
Like,
There's a Lance Armstrong, a cyclist. Do you know Lance?
I heard about him, yeah.
Yeah, Lance Armstrong, American cyclist who won the Tour de France like 7 times, like in the 90s, I think. Anyway, there was controversy around Lance and, you know, taking steroids and stuff. They were all doing it at that time. But anyway, there's some controversy around him. I still think he's one of the greatest athletes of all time. But despite the controversy, but he had a book that's called It's Not About the Bike. It was about his cycling career. And I'll never forget one quote from there where somebody asked him if the Tour de France was hard. You know, the Tour de France race. They said, the Tour's racing. Okay. What's hard is the training camp we do in Colorado every year. Yeah.
Exactly. That summarizes the case of Michael Jordan. His training was very hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Vincent, thank you so much for sharing your insights. Thank you so much for your time. You know, I learned a lot. I'm sure that the Java Challengers audience also learned a lot. So I hope we meet again in a conference around the world, like we did recently in J-Spring, right? We met there, and hope to meet you again soon. And again, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for sharing your experience and all your learnings and insights. Thank you so much.
Of course, my friend, you're welcome. It's great chatting to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'll see you soon then. Cheers.
See you soon.